Today we go to the very last scene of the Torah, the very last chapter of Deuteronomy, and it is, I think, one of the most moving scenes in the entire Bible. Moses climbs Mount Nebo. God shows him the land. Gilead as far as Dan, all of Naphtali, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, the Negev, the Jordan Valley, and Jericho, the whole promised land, spread out before him. And God says, "This is the land I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not go over there." And then Moshe dies. God buries him himself. No one knows where his grave is to this day. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were undimmed and his vigour unabated. He never crossed the Jordan. He never saw it. Today, we read this with Erik Erikson, the psychologist who, more than anyone else in the 20th century, thought deeply about what it means to come to the end of life well and not well, and what the difference between those two endings actually consists of. Erik Erikson is best known for his theory of the 8 stages of the human life cycle. The idea that human development does not end in adolescence or adulthood, but continues all the way to the very end of life, with each stage presenting its own fundamental challenge. If you have heard the phrase identity crisis, you are already familiar with one of his ideas, even if you didn't know it was his. Erikson was born in Germany in 1902, the son of a Danish father who abandoned the family before Erik was born, and a Jewish mother who later married a German Jewish physician named Homberger. Erikson grew up not knowing who his biological father was. He was tall, blonde, and blue-eyed, and felt neither fully Danish, nor fully Jewish, nor fully anything. His whole life and work were, in many ways, shaped by this question of identity, of who you are, how you know, and what it means to claim an identity that is genuinely your own. He trained as a psychoanalyst under Anna Freud in Vienna, emigrated to America, and taught at Harvard, Yale, and Berkeley. His magnus opus, Childhood and Society, published in 1950, laid out all the 8 stages and has never gone out of print. The final stage is the one that concerns us today. Erikson called it ego integrity versus despair. It is the crisis of old age, of the person looking back over the whole arc of their life and asking, whether they consciously use these words or not, was this a life that was worth living? Was it mine? And did I live it? The person who achieves ego integrity in Erikson's framework is not someone whose life was perfect or whose achievements were unlimited. Integrity does not require success on every front. It requires something more interior, a sense of acceptance of the life one has actually lived, with its choices and its costs and its failures and its incompleteness. It is the capacity to look at the whole thing, including the parts that didn't go as hoped, and say, "This was my life. I would not trade it for someone else's." Despair, by contrast, is the sense that time has run out, that the life that was lived was not the right one, that a different choice somewhere along the way would have given something that is now unreachable, and that there was no longer time to find another way. Erikson associated it with a kind of bitterness, the bitterness of a person who cannot accept what is, because what was wanted was different. The fruit of genuine integrity, he said, is what he called wisdom, the capacity to hold the whole of life, including its darkness, with a kind of equanimous affirmation. Not happiness exactly, not satisfaction exactly, something more like the deep-rootedness of someone who has weathered everything and still stands. Now, Moses. Moses is, by any measure, one of the most remarkable human beings in the Hebrew Bible. He led a people out of slavery. He received the law from God. He sustained the community through 40 years of extraordinary difficulty. He was the one through whom God spoke to Israel, face to face as a man speaks to a friend. And he cannot enter the promised land. The reason given, it varies slightly in different places in the Torah, has to do with an incident at Meribah, where Moses struck the rock to bring water from it instead of speaking to it as God commanded. It seems to modern readers like an extraordinarily small infraction for such a profound consequence. Scholars have debated it for centuries. But I want to leave the theological debate aside for a moment and simply look at what Moses experiences on that mountain, because I think Erikson gives us a way to understand it that transforms the whole scene. Moses does not argue, he does not plead, or at least not here at the end. He has pleaded before earlier in Deuteronomy and been denied. Now he simply goes up to the mountain. He sees the land. He sees everything God promised. He sees the whole inheritance of his people spread before him, beautiful and real. He sees it with his own eyes, and then he dies. Erikson would ask, is this despair or is this integrity? On the surface, it might look like the cruelest possible form of despair. To come so far, to have given so much, and to be stopped one river short, to see the destination and never arrive. But I think Erikson's framework gives us something different, because ego integrity is not about completing the task. It is not about arriving. It is about being able to hold the whole of what has been and to accept it. Moses, on the top of Mount Nebo, can see everything. And crucially, the text insists on this. His eyes was undimmed. His sight is perfect. He sees the whole land clearly. He's not going blind. He is not diminished. He is 120 years old and he can see Gilead and Dan and Naphtali and Judah and the sea. And in that act of seeing, in that full, clear, undimmed vision of what has been worked for and what cannot be personally claimed, there is, I think, something that Erikson would recognize as integrity rather than despair. Moses has accepted that his task was to bring the people to the edge, not to take them over. The crossing belongs to Joshua. The entry belongs to the next generation. And Moses has lived completely the life that was his to live. Erikson wrote about the relationship between the individual's life cycle and the larger community's life cycle. One of his profound insights was that the fully developed person, the person who achieves genuine integrity, is able to care for the generation that comes after them, to invest in what will outlast them, to find meaning not only in what they personally achieve, but in what they pass on, what they make possible, what they begin that others will finish. Moses has been doing this throughout Deuteronomy. The whole book is his great farewell address to the people. Moses teaching, Moses reminding, Moses passing on everything he has received, everything he knows, everything that will be needed when he is gone. He has been preparing for this handover for 40 chapters. The mountain is not the failure. The mountain is the completion. There is a detail in the last chapter that I find extraordinarily moving. It says, Moses was 120 years old when he died. And then it says that God buried him. No human hand. God himself performs this last act of care. And then no one knows where his grave is to this day. There is no shrine, there is no monument. The greatest figure in the entire Torah is buried in an unknown location by God himself, and the location is kept secret, presumably, the tradition understood, to prevent the grave from becoming an object of veneration, to prevent Moses from being worshipped rather than the God he served. Moses disappears. He becomes the act of seeing, and then he is gone. Erikson's understanding of integrity includes this, the willingness to let go, the willingness to allow the life that has been lived to be complete, not to cling to it, not to demand more time, not to insist on crossing the river. The person who has lived their life fully can receive death without the bitterness of someone who feels cheated. There is a phrase Erikson used that I find beautiful. He spoke of the integrity of the person who can face death with equanimity as someone who has learned to say, essentially, I am what I lived. Not I am what I achieved. Not I am what I was given, but I am the life I actually lived, with all its particularity, all its costs, all its incompleteness, and I accept it. Moses stands on the mountain. His eyes are clear. He sees everything. He dies in the presence of the God that he had served for 80 years. And the text's last word about him is this: and there has not arisen a prophet since in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. Face to face. That is the life Moses lived. Not the view from across the river, the face of God directly. Perhaps the promised land was the lesser inheritance after all.